Welcome back into Sports Memos Betting Podcast. We got college football, every game on the board with our next guest, Robbie Veno. Rob, welcome to the pod. How are you?
I am good tonight, Drew. How are you?
I'm good, man. We're starting off here. Rotation number 359, 360, Arizona State, Oregon State in the Pac-12. We got ASU -3 on the highway, 57 the total.
Yeah, good game, Drew. Obviously, Oregon State shut down last week by Washington, a game where, Oregon State didn't score a single offensive point. One touchdown in the game, and that touchdown was an interception return for touchdown. And that's a team, Oregon State, that had come in averaging 33 points a game. So certainly they're going to want to get back on track here against Arizona State. For State, it looks like Jaden Daniels, their starting quarterback, will be back. Joey Yellen did a pretty good job in relief last week, 28 of 44, 292, 4 touchdowns against USC in that contest. But it looks like Daniels will go, so you get the dual threat quarterback back here. I think for Arizona State, and the reason why Oregon State will probably find offensive success here, Drew, is that when you start breaking down Arizona State's schedule, that really good defensive start to the season that they had looks more and more like it was a product of the schedule itself. Week 1, Kent State. Week 2, Sacramento State. Week 3, Michigan State. And then Week 5, California. Those 4 teams not known for offense. And ASU did a great job, only allowed 9.5 points per game. But every other game aside from that, 5 Pac-12 games, they're giving up 32.5 points per game. That's an increase of 23. Of 451 yards a game. We know Oregon State's got a potent offense. They could take advantage of that. I could see a little bit of back and forth here from both of these offenses in this game because as the season's going on, Herm Edwards has had to go away from his, initial philosophy of ground and pound style of offense. And they've thrown it around a little more, and they've been pretty successful. So I was a little bit surprised that the total went down here. We see a drop to 57. To me, that's a little too low. I'm going to look into this and maybe get on the over in this game. Wouldn't surprise me either if Oregon State was to come up a winner in this one. You have to check for bowl eligibility possibilities of teams at this time of year. And Arizona State, with a win, would qualify for a bowl. OSU needs 2 more wins. And their last 2 games are difficult. They have Washington State and Oregon to end the season. So both teams obviously will come fully focused, but I think points are going to be the word of the day here in this game. I think over 57 probably the right way to go. And no bad weather in Corvallis. Usually you have to worry about the rain and that nastiness, but looks like it's going to be a nice night for that game.
We got another Pac-12 game here. USC at California. Seeing -6 in the hook. That's the Trojans laying in Berkeley. 48 the total here, Robbie.
Yeah, and Cal becomes bowl eligible with a win here. Big win for them last week. A referee apology game, of course, apologizing to Mike Leach in Washington State for a wrong call where a penalty was enforced against Washington State that was really on California and backed them all the way up to their own 8-yard line. And Washington State, I think, drove about 70 yards, ended up with a field goal. But fact is, the apology came and they should have had the ball at midfield to start that drive. So obviously suspension for that referee. He's not going to be able to ref for a couple of games here. Made a pretty bad mistake, 30 yards worth. I think for California, fundamentally, Drew, it's the second week in a row they're going to see an air raid offense. They saw Washington State last week win that game, like I say, 33-20. Now they'll see USC's version of the air raid, and they're totally different styles. Washington State doesn't really attempt to run the football. Last week, Anthony Gordon, 45 of 58, 407 yards. Cal didn't really stop their passing attack. But USC, with all their receivers, does run the football. So this will be a little bit different version here. I think California offensively, big break last week when Devin Modster came back to play quarterback. Certainly, it helped their offensive production, 426 total yards in that game. And there's a sizable defensive edge to the Golden Bears in this contest. Obviously, they're the better defensive team. USC still struggling with injuries on that side of the ball. I think if you're a totals better, you have to be aware of Cal being 1-8 under the total so far this season. And last week was the first time that they had a game total go over 48 points. It's significant here because the total is 48. So Cal's only had one game all year long, and that was last week against WSU, where the game went over 48 points. So totals bettors keep that in mind. Last week was the first time for the Cal Golden Bears in 5 home games that they were a home underdog. The previous 4, they were home favorites. Last week, they're a home dog. They get a straight-up win. Their record as a home favorite, not good, but they're a home dog again, Drew. I think 6.5 is a little too much here. USC could win the game, but I don't know that they're going to win by more than 6.5 against a California team fighting for bowl eligibility in this one and with the better defense of the two.
And to finish off the 3-pack to start off this section, Robbie, staying in the Pac-12, we got Arizona at Oregon. Ducks laying 27 at home. 68.5 the total here, Robbie.
Well, we know they're going to score. And Arizona's defense is an absolute mess. They tried to fire Marcel Yates, give Chuck Cecil the interim defensive coordinator tag to see if that would make a difference. And heading into the bye, he had one game against Oregon State, and it didn't make a difference. Arizona lost that game 56-28. Into the bye week they go with a chance to regroup and maybe figure out something defensively, but I don't know what they're going to figure out against Oregon, Drew, which right now is rolling on all cylinders offensively. The last time we saw them before they had a bye, they were smashing USC. And the defense that we praised early on and then regressed a little bit against Washington and Washington State, came back again against USC, only allowed 4.3 yards per play. So maybe Oregon in a little bit better shape defensively here. I don't think they'll stop Arizona cold. Arizona's just too good offensively, averaging over 500 yards per game. And now, Arizona's into this 2-quarterback system where it's no longer just Khalil Tate. It's Khalil Tate and Grant Gunnell, the thrower of the two. And even with those two guys, they've been very, very productive offensively. 2 games with the two-headed system, 495 total yards, 526 total yards. They can put up their share. That makes the 27 a little bit scary here to lay if you're thinking about laying it with Oregon. Arizona's defense is so bad that this game could get out of touch within the first half, and therefore it's a little scary to take points with Arizona as well. We see some movement in the total in this game. I think there's a little bit of an exterior factor here. Not too much. I don't want to place too much emphasis on this, but there is a revenge factor for Oregon, who got slaughtered by Arizona last year, 44-15. And a 29-point loss is not easily forgotten by a team like Oregon in a game that they were supposed to win. So I think you've got a little bit of an edge there as well. Oregon's going to win this game, Drew. Whether or not they win by 4 touchdowns or not, a full 4 touchdowns is another question. But I do think that the way they're going right now, 49 points, not out of the realm of possibility, which makes the over in this case a pretty good look. I think last check I saw 67.5. If it's gone anywhere from there, I'm not sure. But I think at that price tag, you can still play over. This game should find its way into the low 70s.
Heading to the Fun Belt, Robbie, we got Coastal Carolina at Arkansas State. Looks like ASU laying 12.5 in Jonesboro. 60 the total here, Robbie.
Yeah, and a little bit of movement on Arkansas State, ASU. Maybe rightfully so, maybe not though, Drew, because defensively they've been a sieve all season long. And despite the fact that 9 days ago on Thursday night, we saw Coastal Carolina get absolutely overwhelmed by ULL. That game, the Coastal Carolina side scored a touchdown finally on their last possession of the game. And they wind up losing big to University of Louisiana Lafayette. They'll have an easier time offensively here no matter who quarterbacks. Fred Payton, the starting quarterback for Coastal, came in and quarterbacked that final series of the game that led to the touchdown. Now, before we get into quarterback controversies between Payton or Bryce Carpenter, it needs to be recognized that Payton quarterbacked that drive against Lafayette backups. They had unloaded the bench at that time, both offensively and defensively. They were playing second and third teamers. It could be a combination of both QBs here. Could be Peyton, could be Carpenter. I think there's not much difference between the two. Carpenter might be a slightly better thrower. But either way, they'll be more productive this week than they were last week because Arkansas State's defense just has so many holes that you can't help but score some points against them. The transition for Arkansas State's offense the last 3 weeks, I don't know why, because they had been throwing the ball very well all season long, even with the second team quarterback, Lane Hatcher, who came in, I think, around game 4 of the season when they lost their starter. But the last 3 games, they've decided to be a very, very run-heavy team. If you just take a look at their play call selection for the last 3 games, Arkansas State, 3 games ago against UL Lafayette, 59% run, 41% pass. Texas State, 65.5% run. UL Monroe last week, 62% run. It could be twofold. It could be that they don't think Lane Hatcher is as good at throwing the ball as they were with Logan Bonner, or it could be that their defense is so bad that head coach Blake Anderson decided maybe we'll run the football a little more and create less possessions. But I'll tell you what, if you go check out the total plays in those 3 games where they've decided to be run heavy, there's still a boatload of plays being run in Arkansas State games. So I don't know if I would put any credence into the theory that he's trying to slow games down and lower possessions. The only reason I bring that up is because this total has gone down from 64 to 60. And when you try to make some reasoning out of why people would want to play under in this game, I think that's the first thing you notice. Arkansas State has become run heavy. That probably lowers the possessions and lowers the final game score. Just not sure that it happens here. I will say this. UL Lafayette, in their game last week against Coastal, did not punt. They scored every time they had the ball, except the last time when the game ended with ULL on the 2-yard line. If there was one more play, they would have scored again. They didn't punt, and that game didn't get over the total. So Arkansas State's not going to score every time they have the ball the way Lafayette did. 60 probably is at a good place right now, difficult to play. I think Coastal Carolina plus 12.5 might be a good side, though, because I do believe they can score punch for punch with Arkansas State.
Robbie, we got UTEP at UAB up next. 44.5 being the total, 18.5 the Blazers laying in Legion Field.
All right, so those people who watch us every week know that I got on my soapbox about UAB a couple of weeks ago. Worst opponent schedule or worst opponent power rating in the country. They go to Tennessee, they get trashed. They come back last week against Southern Miss. They get beat 37-2. Some of that has to do with the fact that their quarterback, and believe me, where UAB is concerned, the gap between starting quarterback Tyler Johnston III and backup quarterback redshirt freshman Dylan Hopkins, it's a big difference. So having to use Hopkins last week can explain away some of the 37-2 loss. He did have to come in, I believe, for about a quarter and a half in that Tennessee game as well. But it doesn't explain away everything, Drew. I just think UAB is not good. They built a nice-looking resume off of garbage opponents, and when they were faced with a couple of good teams, they couldn't handle either one of them. No how, no way. On the offensive side, on the defensive side, I don't want to take too much away from them because the defense has still held up. It's not like Tennessee put up a ton of total yardage against UAB, and it's not like Southern Miss did either. Both teams were held in the low 300s total yardage-wise, so the defense has been there, but that offense is a mess, and there's no way in heck you could lay 18, or at least I couldn't lay 18 with this team right now, with Dylan Hopkins once again being your quarterback this week. It's already been announced that Tyler Johnston's out of this game, so you're going to get the backup, a guy that's produced 9 points in 2 weeks. You're laying 18 against UTEP, and here's the other end of the coin, or the other side of the coin. You want to take UTEP, you kind of hold your nose with that too. Although, a few weeks ago on this show, we talked about how Kai Loxley and head coach Dana Dimmel thought that in their loss to Louisiana Tech, the only way they were stopped offensively was by themselves. They were their own worst enemy. They lost that game 42-21. That was the first game this season where UTEP decided to get out of their two-headed quarterback system and go solely to Kai Loxley. Scored 21 points. Came back the following week, scored 26 points against North Texas. Came back last week, scored 21 more against Charlotte, and actually had a 1st and goal on the 3 in the third quarter. 4 cracks at it. They didn't get in. But the point is their offense has been a lot better by UTEP standards the last 3 games. And if they can put up 13 points here, Drew, or 14 points, boy, 18 is a monster number. I don't see UAB getting to 31 or better against this team unless they do it with some help from their defense. Maybe the defense creates a touchdown or sets the offense up in point-blank range a couple of times. So for me, I would be looking at plus 18 with UTEP in this game. I think they're still playing, believe it or not, a team that bad at this time of season. Still playing with some confidence, still playing with some energy, and I think plus 18 is probably a little too much for UAB right now.
Robbie, heading to the SEC next. We got South Carolina heading to Texas A&M. We got 11. The Aggies laying in College Station, 50.5 being the total.
Well, here's another team, and it's funny this time of year, Drew, when you get to like game 10, even for those of us who make power ratings that we consider to be extremely accurate, it gets harder at this time of year because certain teams drift off so badly one way or the other, so drastically one way or another. There is a better way to put it. Either a team is ascending at this time of year, or a team is quitting on the season, or the coaching staff is going to a youth movement. And for whatever reason, teams tend to stray off of their power rating by a lot at this time of year. You can pick them out. And if you can pick them out, you can make a lot of money these last 3 weeks. I think one of these teams could be South Carolina. This is going to be a bad spot for them. Now, last week, they basically lost any chance they had of going to a bowl game when they lost to Appalachian State at home 20-15. Right now, they're a 4-6 team. They're playing A&M here. They have to finish with Clemson. They're probably not going to win both of these games. I think the season's done. In fact, this week you see a couple of articles where the president of South Carolina is backing Will Muschamp because those rumors or that noise is getting louder and louder. A lot of people, have been calling for Muschamp's head for a while. That loss last week didn't help things any whatsoever. There's been a little bit of disagreement. There was a new AD hired at South Carolina to start the season. The two didn't get along very well. It was kind of a prove-it year for Will Muschamp. And at the beginning of the season, he told anybody who would listen that this was the most talented squad he's had. Now, injuries are certainly not the fault of the head coach, and they've got injuries on top of injuries on top of injuries. Last week, they had to play 2 walk-ons at wide receiver. So the wide receiving core is an absolute mess for South Carolina right now. Now, Will Muschamp, in his press conference Monday, talked like a coach who intends on being back next year, who intends on being in this for the long haul, although some would say he's already been in it for the long haul, and it's time for him to go. They've made the decision, executive decision, so to speak, that they're going to pull all freshmen who might have their red shirts burnt. Guys who have played 4 games will not see the field anymore this year. Veteran players who were injured and have seen 4 games or less will not see the field this year. They're just going to go with what they have. And to me, that just indicates a desire to look toward next year. Not a good spot to be in when you're going to College Station. Texas A&M had a bye week last week. They haven't been great this year, but they did put up 94 points the last 2 weeks before the bye. Jimbo Fisher seems to have the offense rolling a little bit better. And I think in this case, they're going to get a South Carolina team that's so banged up, that's pretty youthful, that is kind of patchwork together at this point in time with no big playability. And I think all that adds up to an A&M blowout. A&M is going to have to close this season with at Georgia and home to LSU. I don't know anybody who wants to play those 2 games, the last 2 games of the year, but they have to. So a win here would be big for a 6-3 team. I think A&M gets it. I'm going to be against South Carolina these last 2 games of the year.
All right, Rob, we got a few games left. We'll steam through them here. Georgia at Auburn, oldest rivalry in the South. Bulldogs 2.5 in Jordan-Hare, 41 the total, Robbie.
I think before I read a couple articles today, Drew, I was going to try and build the case that the offensive line injuries that Georgia suffered last week in that game against Missouri, where 3 offensive linemen left the game injured. The entire right side, Isaiah Wilson and Cade Mays, the tackle and guard, both out. And the center, Trey Hill, left the game as well. And when you take a banged up offensive line and try to play the Auburn defensive line, to me, that creates a real good matchup for the Auburn Tigers at home in Jordan-Hare. However, I go through a couple articles today where all 3 players are expected to play. One actually re-entered the game last week against Mizzou, and the other 2 seem to be good to go. Now, I don't think good to go means 100%, but we're going to see these guys on the field along with their top wide receiver, Lawrence Cager, who went out of that game with a shoulder injury as well. All the injured guys back in makes me kind of reassess the game. I'll say this. Both of these teams are going to come fundamentally with the same exact approach. Let's load the box. Let's shut down the run. Let's see if the opposing quarterback can beat us. Bo Nix, Drew, you know as well as anybody, right? You're into Auburn alum. He's been miserable in all the big games this year. But you know what the difference is? All those games were on the road. He didn't play a single one of those in Jordan-Hare. Oregon was a neutral. A&M was on the road. LSU was on the road. Florida was on the road. Gets a chance to prove something here at home this time. Maybe home field helps him out a little bit. Georgia's defense is as tough as any. But I would think that maybe Bo Nix could perform a little bit better. As bad as he was in those 4 games, Auburn was 3-1 against the spread in those 4 games. So that says something about that defense as well. I'm not going to play the game. I still think there's value in the under here. I saw some 41s out there. To me, it's just the ultimate rock fight. Something in the 20-17 range just seems like the most likely outcome of this game. So I'll probably be on under. And I know people who love, bowl championship chaos would love to see Auburn throw a monkey wrench into this thing this week and beat Georgia.
Yeah, that'd be wild. But also Auburn off of a bye as well. So Malzahn off of a bye has been very good over the last few years. We got Lafayette at South Alabama. This one in Mobile, 53.5, 4 touchdowns flat here, 28 Lafayette laying on the road.
Yeah, one of my favorite teams this year, Drew. UL Lafayette, just a Sun Belt powerhouse, lose to Appalachian State for their 1 loss this season. And it looks like we're headed for the rematch in the Sun Belt Conference Championship. South Alabama's no match for them. South Alabama made a quarterback change last week. Their starter all season long, Cephas Johnson, had an ankle injury. Probably could have played, but they decided to go with redshirt freshman Desmond Trotter instead. So it's another team that's kind of looking toward next season. The 4 running backs at ULL, that running back group is amazing. Trey Regis, Elijah Mitchell, Raymond Calais, and Chris Smith, the freshman last week. All 4 of these guys averaging better than 6 a carry. There's not much that I really have to say here, Drew, except that UL Lafayette's dominant on both sides of the ball, haven't allowed over 25 points in 9 straight weeks, and their offense is as balanced as any that the Sun Belt has this year, probably more balanced than any that the Sun Belt has this year. So to me, South Alabama, no match. It's going to be a blowout. And in fact, I think a couple of weeks ago, they covered a number, maybe it was 23-24 against Texas State. They wind up winning that game 31-3 by 28. I think they can do even a little better here against South Alabama, who's pretty much helpless on offense, and they're not going to score all that much. Look at what Coastal Carolina did last Thursday against ULL.
We got Kansas at Oklahoma State in the Big 12, Robbie. Cowboys laying 17 in Stillwater, 68 the total.
Yeah, we saw a big push on the total today, Drew. Fireworks expected, and boy, Kansas had been headed that direction for 2 games under new offensive coordinator Brent Dearman. Had 2 huge offensive outbursts, 2 games that went well over the total. Then they met up with K-State, their in-state rival, and got totally shut down. Barely over 200 yards offense. They get beat by Kansas State, who was just off of the Oklahoma win, so there was no letdown there. But both of these teams had a bye week to go in, regroup. Oklahoma State's going to move on that Kansas defense. There's no doubt. Even without Tylan Wallace at wide receiver, they had a big game against TCU before their bye. They win 34-27. But their defense, too, so many holes. I mean, you can pick and choose whatever you want to do against either one of these teams, and that goes for a good section of that Big 12 conference. So I agree with the line move here towards the over. As long as it doesn't get beyond the 70 point, there's probably still value there. This game probably lands somewhere in that 72, 73 vicinity. So right now you probably still have some room to roam there. And Kansas under Les Miles, backdoor potential here for a cover, Drew, always with this team right now, the way they throw it, with the way they go up tempo. So, without getting into the side, I think total, just you got to look over, or else don't play at all.
Staying in the Big 12, we got Texas at Iowa State, Robbie. Cyclones laying 7 in Ames, 66 the total.
Yeah, boy, as long as they can pick their heads up, Drew, and I'm going to put this on the head coach, Matt Campbell, and I'm going to go and stand on his side here and think that he can get them back up after that 42-41 heartbreaker last week against Oklahoma, where they went for the win. Give them credit. They went for the win. They weren't going to settle for a tie. But can this team pick their heads up, because they're 5-4 right now, and this win here, a win this week, would make them bowl eligible. I think the head coach can get his team ready. I think he's proven that ever since he's gotten there, and I think that certainly on the defensive side of the football, they are the better of these two teams. Brock Purdy and company have shown all season long that they can go toe-to-toe with any offense in the Big 12. They'll go toe-to-toe with Texas. Texas on the road in Ames, even with Sam Ehlinger, I don't think can do enough here on the defensive side to help him out. So I'm going to be on Iowa State. I'm going to put a little faith in the head coach, have a little faith that this team won't be down off of that loss. They've had some heartbreaking losses this season and been able to bounce back. I mean, that Iowa game way back in week 2 was a heartbreaker, and they were able to bounce back. So for me, it's going to be Iowa State in that game. Just don't trust Texas's defense at all.
2 games left here, guys. And remember the coupon code VENO69. That's VENO 69 for Rob Veno's 7-day all access for less than $10 a day. Just $69 using the coupon code VENO69. That's $50 off retail price at sportsmemo.com. And his college football streak hitting 60% since September 12th. That's 63 and 42. Over 100 plays, hitting 60% in college football. Check him out if you like high volume handicappers. Robbie Veno is your guy for college basketball, college football, and even NFL. So check him out, sportsmemo.com, 7-day all access package using the coupon code VENO69, VENO69 at checkout for a 7-day all access package. We got TCU at Texas Tech up next here, Robbie. Horned Frogs laying 3 on the road. It looks like 55 being the total.
Yeah, I might buck the line movement here, Drew. I'm a little surprised TCU's taking the money. I think that Matt Wells, the head coach of Texas Tech, and his offensive coordinator, David Yost, have finally gotten this team to progress a little bit. They're not the Utah State team or the Utah State offense that these guys coached last year. But last week, they scored on their first 5 possessions of the game en route to a 35-0 lead, I think at halftime, or 35-7, something like that. Now they're home. Jet Duffy has been the quarterback for the majority of the season. He's going to remain the quarterback here because we know now that Alan Bowman's not coming back. And I think this offense is pretty cohesive. For TCU, they struggled last week against Baylor, 9-9 at the end of regulation. Then, of course, we know what happened in overtime, a bunch of points scored by these two teams that sent the game over. But I just don't trust that TCU offense on the road. Max Dugan's going to be a nice quarterback for TCU down the road. But a freshman, again, on the road. To me, Texas Tech, way more firepower. To me, Texas Tech played with a lot of enthusiasm last week. And that triple overtime game against Baylor and subsequent loss could drain a little something from TCU, which now has to travel to Lubbock. So it wouldn't be a strong play, but I think a slight lean towards Texas Tech here, the team that everybody seems to be betting against for this Saturday.
Sorry for the technical difficulties there, guys. We just got 1 game left. Oklahoma at Baylor. College game day going to be there in Waco. Got 10. So Oklahoma laying doubles here, Robbie. 67.5 the total.
Yeah, here's what I don't want to hear out of Matt Rule this week, Drew, and what I don't want to hear out of the Baylor camp. This, what I would refer to as a dopey game plan. I hope they don't do this, but just run the ball, throw 5-yard passes, have long drives, eat up the clock, limit possessions, win a low-scoring game because Oklahoma's so potent. We don't want to give them the ball. You know, for Oklahoma, Houston tried that. Dana Holgerson tried that to start the season. Dana Holgerson won time of possession. Dana Holgerson ran for over 200 yards. They did everything they wanted to do. And guess what? They lost the game. And every time Oklahoma got the ball back, it's 5 plays, a minute 27, touchdown. So Baylor has the weaponry to go out and score against Oklahoma. And Oklahoma showed us the last couple of weeks their defense is vulnerable. Once again, I think they've given up 89 points in 2 weeks. In fairness to OU, the Kansas State game where they gave up 48 and lost, or 47 and lost, whatever it was, 5 Kansas State scoring drives came from 46 yards or less. So Oklahoma was almost their own worst enemy, setting KSU up in point-blank range for a lot of that game. And they still almost rallied to win. The bottom line to this is Oklahoma's going to score. Baylor cannot stop them from scoring. But I do believe Baylor's balanced, that running back tandem, those wide receivers. We saw them all on display against Oklahoma State a few weeks back. For whatever reason, 3 of their last 4 games, they've been held down offensively, and I think they've been held down by their head coach. Matt Rule's play calling has kind of reverted back to what he did at Temple. Charlie Brewer is way too good of a quarterback to waste on that type of offense or offensive game plan. They have to keep him upright because Charlie Brewer's offensive line hasn't been great for him the last month. However, Oklahoma, I think, has only recorded 3 sacks in their last 4 games, so they're not getting to the quarterback either. A lot of points here, Drew. I don't see any way to play this game but over. Until they start making Oklahoma totals, 79 or better, I'm just going to play Oklahoma over because they are going to score and they're going to give up points as well. So that's the way we'll roll in that game.
If it's not broken, don't fix it. Oklahoma's overs from Robbie Veno looking that way. Last 100 plays in college football hitting 60%. That's since September 12th. So check them out at sportsmemo.com. Robbie, anything else you want to throw out there before we shut this down?
You know what, Drew? I think I'm out of good advice here for college football for the time being. But we'll be back at it with the NFL upcoming. So maybe I'll think of something good to tell everybody at the end of that show.
All right, Robbie. Best of luck, man. We'll talk tomorrow. And guys, best of luck with your bets.